Hello, this is James Woodcock from pixelrefresh.com. So, I wanted to relive some of that fantastic nostalgia of interviewing three key individuals I had the pleasure of interviewing all the way back in February of 2012. So why am I re-releasing this podcast now? Well, ScummVM are marking their 20th anniversary, and that's a momentous achievement. And I wanted to make sure people heard their story, and particularly a lot of the origin stories, the challenges of supporting so many platforms and titles. So I hope you really enjoy this podcast. It gives you a really nice insight into some of the thinking and the just amazing achievement of this project. So let's make a start. This is James Woodcock's podcast, episode 32, recorded 26th of February 2012, ScummVM. Hello, my name is James Woodcock from jameswoodcock.co.uk, and today I have with me three developers from the point-and-click adventure software ScummVM. Introducing Eugene Sandulenko, also known as Sev.
Hello.
Arnaud Boutonné, also known as Stranger from ScummVM.
Hi.
And finally, Johannes Schickel, also known as Lord Hoto.
Hello.
So before we begin, please tell us a little bit about yourself, beginning with, this time we'll say, Eugene.
Well, I'm 35 years old, from Ukraine. It is an ex-USSR country, if somebody doesn't know. And I happen to be a co-leader of the project for a few last months, but I've been generally in the project since year 2003 and touched practically every aspect of it.
And Arnaud?
Yes, I'm 38 years old. I'm French from Belgium, and I joined the project 3 years ago. I am now peer officer and co-administrator too. In the real life, I'm a IT manager in an insurance company, and I'm coding also a lot for the engine themselves.
And Johannes?
Well, I'm 22 and from Germany. I'm in the project since 2005. Initially, I worked on the Kyrandia engine, and nowadays I'm more or less working on the general code base of ScummVM, and so I happen to be in the core team nowadays.
So we've got quite a wide range of country involvement there. Is it the same for the other developers of ScummVM?
Yes, we are scattered around the world, but mainly we are concentrated in Europe, I would say. However, we had guys from Korea, from Brazil, then there are a few from United States, and there is a big pack of us in Australia too.
So what exactly is ScummVM?
ScummVM is a set of engines, of game engines, and those are 2D, two-dimensional point-and-click adventures. And why VM? Because majority of the engines we use, they have some kind of virtual machine inside of it with bytecode running the game scripts, and that's it. And another little thing about ScummVM that it is really, really highly portable, and currently it runs on over 30 platforms, from computers to handhelds to game consoles, and of course modern smartphones.
So point-and-click adventure gaming has been around for absolutely years and seen a bit of a resurgence recently. So why point-and-click adventure games? What is it about this genre in particular that makes it so special and makes you as developers spend so much time in bringing them onto computers and consoles and portable devices so we can enjoy them all over again?
Well, I think adventure games are more or less timeless. We convey good stories, so even if a game is 20 years old, it's still worth playing. So I think it's natural that people try to bring it to modern devices. And I recently tried ScummVM on my iPhone, and it is quite fun on the run, to say.
And do you have to jailbreak your iPhone to be able to do that, though?
Yes, that's unfortunately true.
Well, but let me add it, yes and no, because ScummVM is also being represented on apps in App Store by the company iFeeSoft from Israel, and it runs several of the titles, such as Simon the Sorcerer, Inherit the Earth, Flight of the Amazon Queen, and those are ScummVM based.
So and that's all because ScummVM is open source software, isn't it? It allows that to happen. We'll come on to that a little later. So who was originally involved with ScummVM? How did it all begin back in the day?
It started in year 2001 when two guys had separate effort of running different Scum, which is LucasArts, from the LucasArts company, games, particularly Monkey Island 2. It was Yazar, his nickname, and also it was Lude, which is Ludwig Strigels. You know him probably because of MuTorrent, pretty famous. So the guys they wanted to play the Monkey Island on their computers, which were Linux, not Windows even. And being talented programmers, they started to look into the executable code in order to understand how the game works and to start re-implementation of it. Pretty soon they met each other online, they joined effort, and this is how ScummVM was born.
And in a nutshell, ScummVM allows us to play games like Monkey Island, Sam & Max Hit the Road, Day of the Tentacle, Simon the Sorcerer, Discworld, and absolutely a ton more games. Allows them to run on modern Windows operating systems where maybe originally they were meant for DOS. And plus Mac and Linux, it goes on and on and on, doesn't it?
Yeah, it really works on many platforms because ScummVM tries to be portable, and it's written in a way that you can port it easily onto new devices without touching any engine-specific code.
So, for you, which are some of the special games that are currently supported by ScummVM? What are the highlights?
My personal highlight is Monkey Island 2, the first supported game.
For me, despite the name ScummVM, the adventures I loved in the past were Goblins games from Cocktail Vision and also Sierra Space Quest. And I was really, I liked a lot when Free CI Engine joined us and we started to support Sierra Adventures too.
On my side, I really liked Bargain Attack and Fascination from Cocktail. And of course, several LucasArts and Sierra games.
So do you think when ScummVM first came about, it was going to be exclusive just for the LucasArts type games? Or do you think there was that intention to expand into other game engines like Simon the Sorcerer and so on?
It is common misunderstanding, and probably because of the project name, but support for Simon the Sorcerer games was added as soon as 0.0.2, which is second or third version, which was publicly released. And it started to support beyond Scum engine for Monkey Island, Indiana Jones. It had Simon, or later renamed to AGOS engine, which supports Simon the Sorcerer, and later it was added for added support for Feeble Files and some non-adventure games.
So we've already mentioned about the storytelling with point-and-click adventures, but how have they managed to last so long? And particularly now, we've got the age of the touchscreen devices, which seems to be a great new home for point-and-click adventures. We're seeing this fantastic time where we're seeing remastered versions of these classic games appearing on the platforms with new music and maybe new voiceovers. How are they so timeless? It can't be just the story. Surely there's more to it than that.
Well, I would say it is just the story. As Ron Gilbert said, true games are, and the only games are, adventures. because it is like a book or your favorite book. You know it, but you may reread it 10 times in your life, and you never get tired of it. Similarly with the adventures, it is not those first-person shooters or platform games. Once you finish it, you're done. Here you can replay and enjoy the story.
And some of the games have random stories, like some humongous games of how are they called?
For kids.
Yes, for kids. Those games have random stories, so the replay value is really high.
And even in games like Indiana Jones and the Fate of Atlantis, there's 3 paths in the middle of a game, so you can play it 3 times and it's different each time. So it surely gives some replay value in that aspect too.
And let me add the game I have the month in I Must Scream, which is based on Harlan Ellison book. And it has 5 stories in a single game, actually.
So would you say all of your lives are totally entwined with point-and-click adventure games? Do you ever dabble into other genres at all?
Well, I personally prefer also RPG games and RTS games when I play non-adventure games.
Yes. For me, Japanese RPG, especially Final Fantasy series, and some good arcades like Tetris.
And I must admit I have a little problem to answer this question because I no longer play, in fact. So I only play games to debug them.
So it's all about the code?
Yes, really.
So do you ever get any time to enjoy the fruits of your labour?
Well, I usually used to play the games I work on while I work on them and later on for final testing. So I think I spend really much time playing the games I'm trying to support in ScummVM.
As for me, ScummVM currently supports more than 300 games, depending on if you count fan-made games too. But out of those, I personally finished like less than a dozen. I prefer to hack on the games, not play them.
Have you ever used a walkthrough though? I mean, if you don't, it will take a long time, particularly if you're playing something like Discworld, which is notoriously difficult, as great as it is.
Actually, I did. I cheated.
Oh.
Some games, particularly those games which I didn't really like to play on, but liked a lot to play with their internals, with their code.
So with so many people involved with ScummVM, how do you successfully come to a conclusion when a disagreement about the way forward occurs?
Well,
who's the boss?
Yes,
Who wears the trousers?
Recently there was a rearrangement in the team since the co-leader stepped off, which was Max Horn, also known as Fingolfin, who co-lead the project for like 8 or 9 years. And in order to manage the team, I introduced the core team, and Lothota is one of the members of it, and another one being Willem Jan Palestine and myself. And so, as you see, there are 3 of us, and we have technical merit, I would say. And being 3, there is always an even number, and we cannot tie on decisions. But so far, there were no real situations when we had to force somebody. What we tried to achieve is the mutual agreement, and if somebody sees the flaws in the logic or in the code, the best way to resolve the situation is to show different approach again in a code. Because our project is all about managing the huge code base. We recently reached more 1.3 million lines of code, which is quite a lot. And we have 65 developers, active developers, and more than 100 during the whole project history. And project is subdivided in many little teams, which I personally call engine teams. They are pretty independent and they work on a single engine. And since we have all the areas pretty separated, we rarely step on the toes of each other. And of course, there is a core team who works on the major technical things for the overall project guidance. And I think Johannes can add some on it.
Yeah, it's mostly technical aspects, what we do, but we try to keep, as core team, I personally think an important thing is to keep the porters to the different platforms and the engine developers on some common base, since that's usually where things might be misunderstood on the first sense, since it's really not that easy to support so many platforms when you don't know much details about the platform. And here, usually there's no real sharing between the developers on the backends and on the front ends, the engines. So I'm glad that we have a core team here where we can get the discussion flow through.
And then, of course, we have some rules for the project that we are supposed to follow. And as we are in a democracy, we are always allowed to voice up and to say that we are not we do not agree with some specific rule on the developer list, and we may discuss this point all together.
Yeah, that's very good point. It's not like Eugene or the core team decides it alone, but we really try to get an opinion from everyone here and then make our decision. Hopefully with everyone, and only if there's some disagreement, which so far didn't take place, I think we will make a core team vote.
Absolutely. We have public channels like Internet Relay Chat and also our developer mailing list. We don't use forums. Those are for our users support mainly. And usually when somebody comes with an idea, and yes, recently, since we are using GitHub now, it has provides excellent tools for collaboration, particularly for discussion of some features. So if somebody provides some controversial or questionable feature, we can have a discussion, or if the feature is not cooked well, we provide the feedback which allows another developer to fine-tune his code to make it up to our standards, which we have really well developed. And so far, I would say the main reason for this, because I work in IT for over 20 years, and I can tell that ScummVM team is the best team I ever worked with during all this course, and it has the best talented people, best talented developers. And since we are working in a so bright mind surroundings, as it was already mentioned, what we have is a meritocracy. Who does the work, that one has the voice. So in case some guy comes from outside with some crazy idea, like we regularly have even a running joke to rewrite ScummVM in Java or COBOL or whatever, these guys have to prove themselves. And similarly, we have quite high threshold for entering the project. So external developers, they have to prove themselves that they fit our team and can work independently, and their code has to be really high standard. ScummVM code is one of the best code I was working with. So all these comes together into a solid, self-regulated base, and I would say that ScummVM team consists of several Scrum teams in a sense of project management. Yes, and Scrum teams, they are usually self-governed. This is what we have within the project.
And it sounds quite an achievement. So this can't have happened overnight. How did this develop into what it is now, and which is so aspirational for so many developers? Obviously, are very happy to spend a lot of their free time coding for ScummVM.
Well, I joined the project pretty late. So when I joined, it was more or less like it's nowadays, just the core team aspect and the PR office, which Arnaud belongs to, were recently introduced. But I think in an open source project, it's pretty standard that there's people join some implicit groups and push ideas forward. So we have, for example, the people working nowadays on touchscreen devices, and they propose some ideas out of themselves and form a group which can make good decisions on that. So I think it's more or less it's really out of the groundwork which is common in open source, which formed our current system. And I think ScummVM is very attractive for developers because we are well known, and so people who work on an engine have a good chance that their engine gets public feedback, and thus it improves their motivation to work on it, and also it helps them finding other people wanting to work on their engines more easily.
Well, you must be doing something right, that's for sure, because you only have to look on the internet and there are literally thousands and upon thousands of projects that just stop.
Yeah.
So how do you keep it going? I mean, obviously you've got 65 active developers currently all beavering away at the coding, but there's a lot of projects out there that fail, and sometimes very early on and very late on. So what is the magic? What is the secret behind it all?
I don't know.
Yeah, really.
Honestly, yeah, it's because what tracks developers, technical merit, and ScummVM has lots of it. And also, even due to the amount of developers, it is not easy for the project to die in one night. As I mentioned, we had more than 100 developers. That means that about 40 of them, they left the team during these 10 years of project history, which is really, really low attrition rate, I would say. But what is going on? The team actually grows in time. And why so? Because of the dedication. And also we have a tremendous support from our user base. We have over 10 millions of downloads, which is not so often met in the open source world. So I wouldn't say that ScummVM is one of the thousands of open source projects. It is one of the few, the biggest ones. And due to complexity of the code and the excellent basement which was put by original authors, which is, as I already mentioned, Ludwig Strigeus and Vincent Ham, which is Yazer, yeah. What they did, this excellent foundation let the project go well without heavy refactoring, without heavy restructuring of the code base. We are able to do it gradually. And as such, we do not see the end of the tunnel. And also, there are hundreds, if not thousands, of adventure games. And there are specific guys who like this one or that one. And when they come to ScummVM, they come to a prepared infrastructure, which lets them to be concentrated just on the thing they love, the game they played in their childhood or whatever. And this love, or this love for the past, yes, it really drives the people. Take a look at MAME. Which is multi-arcade machine emulator, yeah? It has even bigger team and even bigger code base, and it goes and goes despite the fact that even the prominent people like Aaron Giles leave the team, it still continues. So ScummVM is, I once called it MAME of adventure games. we so successful that during our history we had several project mergers. Several projects joined us, the teams were integrated together, and we continued developing things. One of them is being SCI, which I hope we will talk about later.
So how do you define what exactly a point-and-click adventure is, as I'm sure there are many games that the community and indeed developers of ScummVM would like to see supported within the software, yet don't quite meet the criteria?
So point-and-click adventure, it started to be like, as you all know, with Maniac Mansion and with King's Quest. Those games which are telling the stories. They are contrasted to non-adventures like puzzle games which have no story in them, and on one end, another end which developed later is first-person shooters, when you just kill everything which moves. Then there are arcades, jump out everything which moves, and then there are strategies and role-playing games. Sometimes, unfortunately, these genres, they melt together. So sometimes it is not really easy to understand or to tell whether it is an adventure or not. And in those questionable cases, well, we decided in individual games, and as long as there is a supporters, developers of the engine, and the engine is talking about adventures in the classic understanding of it, because sometimes somebody even calls Quake games as adventure. Yeah, we add support for it. This is how it works, because we have many users which come to us and request this adventure or that one. It is easy to request, but not easy to work on. Sometimes it requires a year or couple of years for a game to start to be completable, and it requires lots of dedication. So it is much wiser to talk to us before starting the work, because your engine may get not accepted eventually.
Yeah, I want to point out that, like Seth said, we really don't have a canonical definition of what a point-and-click adventure is. We have classical examples like Sierra and Lucasfilm Games adventures, and that's basically it, in my opinion. And if someone comes and asks, is this adventure with which ScummVM could support one day, it's done on a per case decision when there's somebody who is really interested in working on it. For me, a point-and-click adventure is strongly story-driven and not so much focused on the puzzles. For example, The Seventh Guest, I'm not sure if I would call it a point-and-click adventure, because from my understanding of it and from what few have played of it, it's more focused at the puzzles.
Yet it is supported, isn't it?
Yeah, but I see no problem in it. I mean, on the other hand, we support nowadays some role-playing games, and in the case of Scum, we have these football games for kids and soccer games for kids, because we work with the engine anyway, so we can support some non-point-and-click adventures without much extra work, and so why shouldn't we add it?
It's very complicated, isn't it, really? There's no simple answer to it.
No, I don't think so, personally.
And of course, there is a kind of branch off as well from ScummVM, isn't there, called Residual VM?
Technically, I wouldn't call it branch off, but it's more like a sister project. So we share some code, and we also share some developers, and Residual VM is more focused on 3D adventures like Grim Fandango or Escape from Monkey Island. Grim Fandango is actually the game which it initially aimed at support for, and I think it's pretty far advanced nowadays, if not even finished. And
It's completable
ScummVM
at least.
Yeah, and ScummVM is solely about 2D games.
So was there ever a time then where Residual was almost part of ScummVM, where Grim Fandango, the hope was it would be incorporated with ScummVM, but then the decision was to maybe separate the two? Is that how it happened?
Well, ScummVM, Residual VM, it got renamed recently. It was Residual. Why it was a sister project? Because of the escape of Monkey Island, which is sometimes called Monkey Island 5, which is same LucasArts game, but based on a slightly different engine, and they introduced a third dimension to everything, mainly to actors, and also Grim Fandango. It used to be in on the same hosting as we have, but it was all separate, and it, of course, as it was mentioned, it borrows lots of code, particularly our compatibility layer, which is called OSystem. But other than that, it supports only 3D games. Recently, it was a support for Myst 3, and also, as I know, there is a support for Little Big Adventure in the works. So Residual VM is same ScummVM but for three-dimensional adventures. And why it's separated? Well, there were some personal issues, there were some controversial. So the leader of the project, Pavel Kolodzeysky, he decided to go by himself, and now the team of Residual grows. It was in kind of limbo for 5 years or so, but now they are really going faster and faster in their development.
So ScummVM, as we've already discussed, is available on a number of platforms. So how do you accommodate for the various interfaces available? There's mouse and keyboard, touchscreens more recently, and the good old-fashioned controller. So how do you make it all work?
Well, as Eugene said already, we have this compatibility layer, which is called OSystem, and it's basically where the front end, the engines work with, and the back end. So the actual processing with the hardware events, etc., is on this side, and that's solely done by the ports. So basically, for an engine, it's no different if we have a touch screen or a controller or a mouse and a keyboard. It basically there's an abstraction layer, so for the engine it looks totally the same.
And was that a difficult thing to add?
Quite frankly, we had it for a really long time, this compatibility layer, and it was introduced really early. I think initially for the Windows CE port or for the Palm OS port, I'm not sure right now. It was already there before I joined in 2005, which really shows it has been a really early stage in the project where it seemed necessary to support different platforms.
So when you say it's compatible on iPhone, was it just a matter of doing some basic porting and a lot of it worked without you having to do much alteration? The core is there, ready?
I didn't write for iPhone port, but in theory, it's basically that you really just have to implement the access to the events, the input events, and to the operating system, and that's about it. It's in reality, depending on the platform, it's not quite that simple, but usually it's pretty easy to port ScummVM to a new platform.
For the sake of compatibility, we developed our own graphics user interface, specifically for resolving the problem of portability. And on majority of our devices, we have exactly the same interface, which is, frankly speaking, not really well suited to touchscreen devices, which are operated by fingers. Those are more geared towards toward mouse. But what we think about is to introduce Google Summer of Code task for developing the touch-based interface. ScummVM has all the infrastructure for it. It is just a matter of mapping the widgets or buttons and dialogues on screen, so it will be more suitable for to be finger operated. And as Arnaud already mentioned, it is really portable. And to port to a new platform, it takes something like 2 weeks of evenings, if you know well this platform. But the ScummVM will look exactly the same everywhere.
We have also something concerning the portability in each engine. The developers have to be really careful about the way they are reading things in memory. So we have a set of macros to help us to be sure that the endianness of the platform are respected. And this is also something important about portability.
So any idea which has been the hardest platform to crack?
Yes, I can name 2. One is Nintendo Double Screen, and another one is Palm OS, which is no longer supported. But Palm OS gave us lots of headache because of the very limited capabilities of this platform. And similarly, Nintendo Double Screen has just 4 megabytes of available memory, which is not enough to run many games, and also it has really tiny screens, pixel-wise. So those are the most problematic ones.
And looking ahead to the future, do you relish the idea of supporting such things as maybe the PlayStation Vita that has just recently released?
Well, I think if there's tools to develop for it, somebody will come up with it. I definitely think so. But if there's somebody in the team actively working on it or thinking about it, I'm personally not sure.
My understanding that PlayStation Vita, it is PlayStation 2 and the PlayStation Portable meld together. And ScummVM works on both. And in case Sony will publish their official SDK, which will allow for homebrew development, it will be just a matter of time when somebody will come up with a port of ScummVM.
And that's something you'd welcome?
Yeah, most definitely.
Of course.
The more ports, the better.
Yes, and if somebody will come tomorrow for a port for the refrigerator, we will gladly accept it, as we already accepted a port for Samsung TV sets.
Gosh.
So ScummVM can run on TV without a computer.
That's quite exciting, really, isn't it? How we've come along.
Ecuador, Pavel Kołodziejski was working on it. He bought this TV set, and it contains Linux inside, which is Debian based. So it was not so difficult to port on it. The only problem is there is the control, because you have to use infrared remote, TV remote for it, which is sluggish. But still, he managed to do it, and it works well.
And I suppose as a curiosity, just to see if it does work, and the fact that it did, that's quite remarkable, isn't it? TVs are no longer just the screen that we view all this wonderful content on. We can actually do things with it far more.
Yes.
So, of course, all the platforms must pose other challenges, including supported resolutions, processing speeds, and more besides. So how do you decide on which platforms are supported, and what are some of the main obstacles you have to overcome for ScummVM to work correctly, other than what you've just said about the memory?
We support those platforms where there is somebody to write port for that platform. That's it. For instance, I still in negotiation stage with the guy who ported ScummVM to original Amiga, not Amiga OS, which is running on PCs, but original Amiga running on Motorola. And you may find him on YouTube when he succeeded with running full throttle on original Amiga, which is absolutely incredible as for me. It is similarly incredible like we are running ScummVM on Nintendo 64 console or over a cartridge. And as a result, of course, his port is really limited. But we are having the least denominator. We are geared towards a lowest platform, like Nintendo Double Screen. Unfortunately, the porter is busy with his real life, so he was not pushing us hard recently for resolving portability issues, particularly memory issues. But in the past, during the release time, he just approached us and was telling us the problems he was facing when running ScummVM on his platform, and we were trying to resolve it. And of course, since it is a common code base, resolving on single platform brings benefit to all of them. And currently, ScummVM requires, don't laugh, but something about 300 megahertz processor and something like 16 megabytes of memory, and then 98% of the games will be running on it.
So is that basically a testament to how good the code of ScummVM is as well?
Well, yes. And we started 10 years ago with the same core code base. And you can imagine that 10 years ago, computers were much more slower than today.
Of course.
And it was designed for those computers.
So there are certain games that actually shipped with bugs before the wonderful days of the good old patch that have been corrected within ScummVM. So what examples of this can you share with us?
I think in the Scum engine, we, for example, in Salmon Max, where some game lookups, for example, at the Bigfoot party, if you talk to waiter, it might happen that the game locks up and you can't actually do anything anymore. And we actually patch the game script on the fly so it doesn't lock up. That's, for example, bug we fixed, which in the original is still present.
There are the same kind of fixes in Cocktail Engine, Garbage In, because there were several bugs blocking any progression or putting the game in an unfinishable state. So we fixed those too, and several glitches and crashes in the Sage engine. So for Ringworld and Blue Force.
I can say that every engine has similar things which fix original game bugs. Unfortunately, at those time the games were distributed on a physical media, it was not possible to fix bugs after your shipment date, after your release date, but we can do it today. And thus, as a result, those games, especially Sierra games, were really, really buggy. And for some of the engines, we even have a subsystem inside of engine specifically for letting us to fix original bugs easily, like those script patches, like those fixes to the engines themselves. And there is no single engine without those tweaks. Every game has this aspect or that one fixed. As you maybe know, that Broken Sword games, Broken Sword 1 particularly, it was easily possible to render it uncompletable at the end of the game. We fixed that, and it was mentioned even in manual, but of course we don't need to do it, we just fix it.
ScummVM can also enhance the quality of the graphics when viewed on much larger displays than originally the titles were intended for when we viewed them on, say, a 14-inch portable monitor. So what can you tell us about this area?
Well, there's different kinds of enhancements there. For example, on desktop platforms we have scalers, which basically take the game screen and apply some filtering, resulting in a bigger image and anti-aliasing. And sometimes we even have in-game support for graphic enhancements, like in the SCI engine we have with undeferring, which Kiewitz implemented. His real name is Martin Kiewitz, by the way. And this basically adjusts for the fact that back in the days the old SCI games had to run with 16 colors, but the game graphics actually contained more colors when the platforms we run on featured. So we basically use all of the colors which it actually intended to use back then.
Also, for instance, for the older games like AGI, we mix sometimes better graphics from Amiga into DOS games, which was not available, of course. And another important part of our project to mention is that we have James Woodcock with us, who is providing us with an excellent enhancement to the game scores, which is music. And we have currently, I believe, 4 or 5 games supported by it. And I believe, James, you are not going to stop there, do you?
Well, you should say that, Eugene. The next one I'm working on is The Seventh Guest, and already supported is Inherit the Earth, Simon the Sorcerer, Discworld, Beneath a Still Sky, and also hopefully very soon, because the music's nearly completed, Touché, The Fifth Musketeer. So I've got plenty to be getting on with, especially now I've got Seventh Guest permission, just recently approved. And basically what I'm doing is taking the original MIDI music, which back in the day would have played on very basic sound cards, and bring them bang up to date so everybody today can enjoy a very high standard of music reproduction rather than having to rely on the MIDI capabilities of their computer. And specifically when ScummVM is now available on portable devices, which could lead to all kind of fun when it comes to MIDI playback performance, well, you don't have to worry about that because they're all external audio files now once I've done my work on them. So hopefully everyone enjoys that. I certainly get a lot of positive feedback, and who knows what's around the corner. I may add some more yet. We'll have to wait and see.
And yes, I can second your thoughts about the people appreciate it, because we have tremendous response on our forums when you release every game pack for it, and I myself really enjoy, because it is completely new experience when playing those games, even well-known games which you play to the death.
So ScummVM is classed as open source software. So what does this mean exactly to the user, and what are its advantages for both the development team and the users of the software?
Users which are also developers, we of course have the advantage. If we find a bug, we can try to fix it themselves and thus contribute as web patch, so we can fix it for everybody. So that's the best case, I would say. And of course, since we are directly giving user support, we really like it when users can tell us bugs we find, so we can try to fix them as soon as possible, which I think in an open source project gives you a much better relationship to your user base. And we of course can benefit more easily from our fixes, since we have the so-called nightly builds, which are current development snapshots. So if we fix a bug a user reported, we can try it immediately with a fixed build.
And open source basically is an extension of free, which is also very exciting for the user.
Yeah, sure.
Everybody likes free. So open source is then almost anybody can contribute to it, see all the hard work that's gone into it by viewing the source code, and it can span into other projects and other areas, have other uses that maybe you guys haven't even thought of.
Yeah, there's actually companies selling ScummVM with their projects, for example. There's re-releases of the Broken Sword series from Revolution Software, and actually Revolution Software is, I think, the company we have the best relationship with. I mean, they contributed a source code for Broken Sword 1 and 2, from which we added support. And the open source bit gives benefit to everyone here.
Another company which sells ScummVM is the Pull-in Software, who released Goblins 4, and maybe you know that Goblins 4 is packed with Goblins 1 to 3, which are ScummVM based again. And as I mentioned, there are a couple of companies which are selling ScummVM on App Store. And of course, there is a Good Old Games, and they selling games and providing some free games through their distribution, and similar service with .emu.com. It is legal way to purchase some of the old games which are DRM free, and all those games which are supported by ScummVM are shipped with ScummVM. For the companies, it is a good because they can get support for their games free of charge, and with some companies we even have arrangements that we add engine to our collection, and then original game authors can sell the game over again, bring it back to market. For them it goes as a free of charge, of course, because we are not non-profit, not commercial project. But for us, it is a joy of hacking on another game engine and supporting more games. So it plays really good to everyone. And again, to add, for the developers, being open source means that there are many eyes which look into your code. And as Linus Torvalds once told, that when the more eyes you have looking into your code, the less bugs there are in that code. So this is why ScummVM still lives for these 10 years. It runs on so many platforms, and it is a commercial grade quality software.
ScummVM supports many great titles from Monkey Island and other LucasArts classics, as well as Simon the Sorcerer and Broken Sword titles, and many more besides. So what permissions, if any, do you need to support point-and-click adventure titles within the ScummVM software?
In fact, as we are in Europe, in most of our countries, reversing executables is legal. So theoretically, we don't have to ask for specific agreements or authorizations. But what we are trying to do is it's getting in contact with the originals authors or with the legal rights owner and asking them what they are thinking about that. So we are trying to respect them and show them what they may benefit of that move. And of course, if they want to collaborate and give us sources, well, it's easier for us.
And I suppose there's a lot of companies now that have no longer existing since the games were released, so that must be a minefield trying to get hold of the correct people as well.
It's not obvious indeed, but when we are trying to find people, we finish to find some, at least with some rights. So we always find someone, or most of the time at least.
I can tell that we don't need any permission, mainly because we do not distribute any games. And we, on the contrary, we have a strong anti-piracy rules in our project. We don't give any support for pirated games once we have them inside. But we are chasing original developers for two reasons. One is to get access to original source code if possible, because of course it is 100 times easier to work with the source code than with the compiled executable, which we have to reverse engineer. And second reason why we are looking for original developers is to try to get hold on the game assets and release it as freeware if it is possible. And our attempts were successful in both aspects. We have more than 10 different engines based on original source code, and we have 5 games which are being distributed from our website legally, freeware, and I can tell you there is some more in a queue. So just wait for a bit, and you will see more freeware game releases from us.
So some of the free games that are available are Beneath a Steel Sky, Flight of the Amazon Queen, Lure of the Temptress, Dracula the Vampire Strikes Back, and Soltis.
Yes, and Dragon History.
So even if you've got no point-and-click adventures in your collection, you've got 5 to start off with.
Exactly, and I can tell you a bit more, because for AGI and SCI engines, which are Sierra games, there is a strong community, at least it was in the past, which produced more than a couple hundred of games which have a really good quality. And of course, those are fan-made. They are freely available on the internet.
So what other games could we see in the future? Because I imagine even with all these titles currently compatible, there's always the request for more and more and more. So are there any other in the works that you can reveal today?
Okay, so some of the games, those are Neverhood. Then there is Shadow of the Comet. Then there is Asylum engine. We have Picture. We have Star Trek for 25th Star Trek anniversary, and there is even more. You may find this information, majority of this information, on our wiki, and we try to keep the list up to date. Besides, I believe, Neverhood, which is progressing very well. So maybe someday it will be also in our engine, in family of our engines.
And a little personal request from myself. Any news on the Gene machine?
It is ILL engine.
Oh dear.
And yeah.
That is literally the name of the engine. It's not poorly or anything.
And I can tell you there is no progress, at least since October of last year.
Oh dear. Well, if it ever does get support on ScummVM, I've almost done the music for it, because I did that as a bit of a hobby, because I like some of the tracks in it, particularly the theme. So maybe that's a little bit of incentive for somebody who's listening. So how do you find the time to work on ScummVM? Because you obviously have your own jobs as well, and no doubt family commitments, and you want to take a break away from working. Is ScummVM a nice release, as well as the ability to play some of these classics all over again?
Well, at least for me, it's something that is really a peaceful moment. So coding is really what I'm looking for. And well, the key solution is to sleep less, in fact.
Well, I think ScummVM is really a good thing to spend your free time with. It's fun, it's entertaining, and there's always things you can learn from it.
As you imagine, I can spend much less time these days as before, but still I manage to do all the management work, pardon the pun, and some coding as well. But I really enjoy it. I really enjoy because it is the only programming project I'm involved closely in. Because on my daily job, I'm more into management, pure management, without any coding. So for me, it is like bringing the old days when I was coding 10, 12 hours per day on my day job plus ScummVM, and I keep myself in a shape as a developer.
So how do you see ScummVM progressing within the next few years and beyond?
It is progressing unexpectedly fast and faster and faster. As I mentioned, we already have our team constantly growing. We have more and more developers joining us without old ones leaving or becoming inactive. And recently we are starting to be short on the games which are script-based, because majority of the recent titles, they are hard-coded. but still there is a tremendous interest because again ScummVM is already a mature project and it is pretty straightforward to add an engine to it when you have work on the engine itself. So I would say that we have a bright future. And of course, currently I see that there is a reinstallment of adventure genre, particularly thanks to those mobile devices, because they are not so powerful to run a decent first-person shooter. So people start to spend time with puzzle games and of course adventures. And this is why we see all those re-releases. We have a constant flow of requests and questions from original game developers on support of this or that title on mobile devices like iPhone or Android. And I believe that we have 20 years in front of us for supporting more games.
How can ScummVM be supported by the community?
Well, obviously you can play it, you can tell your friends about it, and you can give us feedback about bugs you encounter on our bug tracker, for example, or on our forums. And when we usually have, since we are usually working on code, we sometimes miss the time to bring our documentation, especially our user documentation, up to date. So if somebody wants to step up, write some good user documentation for us, that would be splendid, and I think everyone would happily accept it.
I just wanted to say that if you want, if you are a legal right owner or an original game author, then don't just wait until we contact you. You can also contact us and discuss with us about what we can do with those games. So it's really something that we will appreciate.
And of course, if you want to support our project, because we still have some expenses like hosting, there is always donation button. And if you want to buy Good Old Games, then use goodoldgames.com service and from our site, and we will have a share in that. But the main and the most important support from community is playtest ScummVM, because we don't have testers within our team, and we rely on the community during our releases. And when you do this, when you play the games and not just play, and when they crash or whatever, silently close it. Tell us. We need it. We need your feedback on the bugs. We need you to retest the bugs as we fix them. This is the most appreciated contribution which we have from you.
So finally, how can we find out more about ScummVM?
We have several media that we are using currently. We have, of course, our website, which is scummvm.org, and we have Google Plus, where we have an account, and Facebook, where we have a ScummVM page. Then also Twitter.
Well, thank you so much for joining me in my podcast, and I wish you all the very best for the future. As Eugene says, it looks bright.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.